Have you ever asked your kid to introduce themselves to someone and you just get crickets? That shy little whisper, or they mumble their name into their shirt, or maybe they just go completely silent. Yeah, it's a moment so many of us parents have been through. And you think it's so simple, right? Just say your name. But for a child, that tiny little request can feel absolutely huge. Today, we're going to get into exactly why that is.
And this quote right here, it just hits the nail on the head. A mountain. I mean, what a perfect way to describe it. What we as adults see as just a tiny little step, a child is looking up at this massive, intimidating climb. It really makes you see the whole thing differently. It's not just shyness. It's a real, genuine challenge.
So let's talk about this mountain called hello, because it's not just one big rock they have to climb. The source material explains that this one little action actually puts three really different and pretty demanding psychological tasks on a child all at the same time. It's like a perfect storm of social pressure, self-discovery, and just finding the right words.
Okay, let's break this down. As you can see here, this one little introduction asks a kid to face the fear of being judged, to somehow describe a self that's basically still under construction, and to find the right way to say it all without a lot of examples to copy. We're going to walk through each one of these to really see how they're all connected.
First up, that intense spotlight feeling of confronting social evaluation. This is all about the external pressure, that feeling of all eyes on you and that deep down fear of getting it wrong in front of everybody. This is kind of like the base of the mountain.
For a child, the second they're asked to step up, their brain can just start spinning with questions like this. What if everyone's staring at me? What if they laugh? What if I mess up my own name? I mean, even by 6 or 7 years old, kids are so aware of what it feels like to be embarrassed, and that fear alone can just be completely paralyzing.
And what's so fascinating is that this isn't just some vague feeling of being nervous. It's actually a built-in brain function. Our brains have what's called a social monitoring system. You can think of it like a worry detector that's always on. Its job is to protect us from being rejected by the group, but for a kid in that moment, those alarm bells can be ringing off the hook.
Okay, so let's move on to the second demand, because this is where it gets even more complicated. It's not just about what other people are thinking. Now the child has to look inward. They have to try and answer the question, so who am I? Which, let's be honest, is a question most of us adults are still working on.
An introduction usually needs a little bit of self-knowledge, right? It starts with the simple stuff. What do I even like? For you and me, that's probably a pretty easy question. But for a kid, their interests are changing constantly. Their favorite thing this week could be totally different from what it was last week. They're literally in the middle of a journey of discovery.
And then you go a little deeper. What am I good at? A self-introduction often means sharing a talent or a hobby. But that takes a level of self-awareness and confidence that's still just starting to grow. They might not have the words or even the certainty to just declare to a stranger what their talents are.
And this all leads to the really big one. What is my story? Because at the end of the day, an introduction is just a tiny personal story. And kids hesitate because they haven't really built that story yet. They've got all these little pieces of who they are, but they just don't know how to put them all together into a sentence yet.
So, let's say a child manages to get past the fear of being judged, and they have some idea of who they are. There's still one more hurdle to clear. How do you actually say it? And that brings us to our third challenge, the lack of examples, or what we call expressive models. This right here illustrates the gap in their learning so perfectly. Kids learn how to talk by watching and listening to us. And a lot of their day is filled with simple instructions and quick answers. But what they really need to see, what they need to have as a model, are those richer kinds of communication. Adults telling stories about their day, sharing personal thoughts, and just showing them how to talk about yourself.
So here's the crucial point. Children are not empty. They have this whole universe of ideas and thoughts and feelings inside of them. What they're often missing is this structure, the blueprint really, for how to organize all those amazing ideas and share them with the world in a way that feels safe and natural.
Once you understand these three big challenges, it really shifts your whole perspective as a parent, doesn't it? It moves us away from being some kind of director, telling our kids what to say, and it puts us in a much more powerful and helpful role. We get to be their guide, their story guide. And that right there is the biggest takeaway from all of this. Handing a child a script to memorize just adds to the pressure and feels fake to them. But when we act as a guide, when we ask them questions about themselves, when we share our own stories, when we help them find their own words, we're giving them the tools they need to climb that mountain all by themselves. And that's a skill that's going to last them a lifetime. You know this look, right? We've all seen it. That little moment of hesitation when a kid is asked to step forward and say hello. I mean, it's a feeling we can probably all remember ourselves. That whole mix of shyness and uncertainty. It's totally universal.
But what if we could give them a simple toolkit, something to help turn that hesitation into quiet confidence? That's what we're going to get into today. Let's break down how you can help your child find their voice when it's time to introduce themselves.
I mean, let's be real. Putting yourself out there is a huge deal. For a little one, standing up and introducing themselves, it can feel like being on the biggest stage in the world. And yeah, that can be a little scary. And you know what? That's totally okay.
So the very first, and honestly the most important step for us as parents or guides, is to kind of reframe the whole goal here. This is not about aiming for some perfect, polished performance. Nope. The real goal is just about connection. And this idea right here, it just takes all the pressure off. This is a really key point from our source material, and it's such a huge relief, not just for the child, but for the parent too. The point isn't to be flawless. It's about being real, being authentic.
Okay, so that brings up a really good question, right? If it's not about being perfect, then what are we aiming for? What actually makes up an introduction that feels strong, confident, and, this is the most important part, true to who they are?
And believe it or not, the answer is surprisingly simple. It really just comes down to 4 simple foundations. Just 4 easy-to-remember steps that kind of build a ladder right up to that confidence.
All right, step 1, a warm greeting. I know, it sounds super basic, right? But just a simple hello can have this really powerful, calming effect, starting from the very first word.
And what's cool is there's actually a little bit of science to this. When a child starts off with a friendly, "Hi everyone," and cracks a smile, it physically triggers a relaxation response in their body. Seriously. It eases the tension in their shoulders, it can slow their heartbeat, and it just makes everything that comes next feel so much easier. Okay, on to step 2, a clear structure. For a kid, knowing what comes next is, it's everything. Having that predictable path is exactly what builds their sense of security. I love this metaphor from the source material. It says to think of it like training wheels on a bike. You provide the structure first, right? And that stability is what allows the confidence to just follow naturally.
So having this clear path is so important because it does 3 really crucial things for a child. First, it stops them from feeling totally overwhelmed. Second, it reduces that fear of, oh no, what if I forget what to say? And finally, it just creates this feeling of safety, which lets them relax and just be themselves. Okay, now we're getting to the real heart of it. Step 3, add a hobby or a strength. This is where a child really starts to build what our source material calls an inner narrative of competence.
And look, this is about so much more than just listing activities. When you ask a child to name something they enjoy or something they're good at, that is an incredibly powerful moment of self-recognition for them. It's like this small but absolutely vital building block for their emotional development.
And check out how simple this can be. It doesn't have to be some huge achievement. It could be just, I like drawing, or I'm good at solving puzzles, or even, I enjoy helping others. Every single one of those statements is a quiet declaration of their own value.
And that brings us to our final step, number 4. Now, this one's kind of optional, but oh man, it's incredibly powerful. Tell a story. This is the part that turns plain old information into a real sense of identity.
Just think about the difference here for a second. Without a story, an introduction is just a list of facts, right? But you add one tiny story, and suddenly that child becomes a memorable person, someone with their own unique point of view.
And honestly, here's the most beautiful part of this last step. Yeah, of course, a story helps the audience remember the child, but what's even more important is that it helps the child remember themselves. It cements a positive moment or strength right there in their own mind.
So, when you put all 4 of these steps together, you start to see that this is about way more than just a simple introduction. It's really about a much bigger, more important goal, helping a child truly find their own voice. So really, the crucial point that we circle all the way back to is this. The ultimate goal of this whole thing is to help a child build that inner narrative of competence, that quiet, steady belief in themselves that they're going to carry with them long after the introduction is over.
It's a simple framework, but it's pretty profound when you think about it. It just shifts the whole focus away from performance and toward connection, away from anxiety and toward authenticity.
So that really just leaves us with one final thought. How will you help your child find their story?
Hey there, and welcome. If you've ever been looking for a really simple, gentle way to help your child build up the confidence to introduce themselves, well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we are going to break down a fantastic little framework that can turn a moment of shyness into a real chance for connection. So let's dive right in. So, does this whole scene feel a little too familiar? You know, your child suddenly clams up, maybe hides behind your leg, or just mumbles their name to the floor? It's such a common challenge for so many parents. But the good news is, it's absolutely something we can work on together with a bit of patience and, the right tools. Okay, so let's start by just reframing this whole thing. Shyness, it isn't some flaw that you need to fix, right? It's just a feeling, and like any feeling, we can learn to understand it and kind of move through it with a little bit of practice and, honestly, a whole lot of support from us. The key word here is gentle. This isn't about pushing for some kind of sudden dramatic transformation overnight. No, we're talking about building a foundation, brick by brick, through a simple and positive process that really empowers your child to share who they are with real confidence. So what is that process? Well, think of this less like a strict script they have to memorize and more like a fun little recipe for confidence. It's a super simple 5-step framework that gives kids a clear path to follow, which takes all the guesswork and anxiety out of that dreaded introduce yourself moment. Let's just walk through the steps really quick. We start super easy, a simple greeting. Then the basics, right? Name, age, class, the stuff that's predictable and helps calm their nerves. And from there, we move into something a bit more personal. The meaning of their name, their hobbies, and maybe a tiny little story. See, this structure is their safety net. Now, what makes this recipe truly special is step 3. This right here is the secret ingredient. It's the part that turns a boring list of facts into a really personal story. It connects them to their own identity in such a powerful way. And this example shows exactly what I mean. An introduction like this isn't just spitting out information, it's creating a connection. It shares a little piece of their family's story and a personal value. This is where simple confidence becomes this deep emotional confidence, making them feel truly special and memorable. Now, of course, this recipe is only as good as the chef. And parents, you are the supportive head chefs in this little confidence kitchen. Your role is absolutely crucial, but don't worry, it's actually a lot simpler than you might think. So the most important thing here is consistency, not intensity. Confidence is built through these small daily interactions. It's all about making self-expression feel normal, offering gentle opportunities to practice, helping them discover what makes them shine, and this is a big one, resisting that urge to overcorrect them all the time. So how do you make self-expression a habit? Easy, by asking gentle, reflective questions. Questions just like this one. Or maybe, what made you happy today? Or, hey, what did you learn from that mistake? There's no pressure, just genuine curiosity. And why does this work so well? Because these little daily check-ins help children build this mental library of their own experiences, their own strengths and feelings. They're basically gathering the material for their own story, so when the time comes to share, they actually have something they feel good about saying. Okay, let's talk about that don't overcorrect rule for a second. It is so easy to jump in with a speak up or no, say it properly, but those interruptions can totally stifle their natural expression and make a child feel like their way of speaking is just wrong. The key is to guide the structure, but always, always preserve their unique personality. So, as we start to wrap up, let's just pull back and look at the bigger picture here. Because teaching a child to introduce themselves isn't just about getting through one moment at a family gathering. Oh no, it's about so much more than that. What you're really doing here is giving them a foundational tool for life. You're teaching them how to calmly and proudly present themselves to the world, how to own their own story and feel a real sense of who they are. Now that is a skill that will serve them forever. In fact, this one simple act actually nurtures 5 core life skills that are absolutely essential for their development. I mean, think about what this really builds. They build self-awareness by knowing their own strengths, they get communication skills by telling their story, emotional regulation to manage those nerves, social confidence from all that positive practice, and finally, the ability to shape and present their own identity to the world. That, my friends, is the real prize. So I'll just leave you with this question. It doesn't have to be some big, dramatic story. Maybe they were just kind to a friend today, or maybe they tried something new, even if they were scared. Just start there. Because helping them see that story, well, that's the very first step in helping them learn how to tell it.